Hey everyone, welcome back to KBS Technocraft Python tutorial day 11. Today, in this tutorial, we are going to understand test case, test suite, test fixer, and test escape using example in Python. I have divided this tutorial in four sections. The first, understand the test cases, and then test suits, and then we will cover test fixes, and finally we are going to cover how to skip a test case. But before we dive into today's video, I would recommend to go through the unit test part 1 tutorial in which I have covered the fundamental of unit testing. And I just want to take a moment to invite you to join my channel KBS Technocraft. If you like what you see, please consider hitting the subscribe button. So we will first try to understand what are the test cases, test suite, test fixer, and test skip. So now let's understand what is the test case. A test case is a set of instructions that define a particular test scenario, including the input data, expected output, and any pre or post condition. Test cases are typically implemented as a function or method in a testing framework and are designed to test specific aspects of a system under test. We will discuss more detail with example. Let's move on the test suite. A test suite is a collection of test cases that are grouped together for a specific purpose, such as testing a particular feature of module. Test suite can be used to organize and run multiple test cases at once and can be customized to include or exclude specific test cases based on the criteria and requirement. Now let's move to the text fixer. A text fixer is a preparation work that is required before running the test case and cleanup work that is required after the test case run. So any activity which you are performing before the test execution and after the test execution, you can consider that is part of text fixer. For example, if you are using a test case where you are creating some set of test data and also after completing of the test case you are tearing down that test data, those case the setup of the test data and tear down the test case are considered to be a text fixer. Now we will understand what is the skip test. Skip test case is a test case that is not run because it is currently not implemented or because it is not available or applicable in the current environment. For example, you have written some test cases which you want for a particular environment or a particular time you want to skip it, you don't want to run it. In that case, we will use this concept called skipping test cases. For example, if a test suite contains 10 test cases, out of 10 test cases, there are two test cases which you want to skip it, then you can decorate that particular test case with the skip attributes and you can skip those test cases. Now we will move to practical example. Before we move to the practical example, we will create a environment. To create environment or create the setup to run this unit test case, first step, we will create a folder any under any directory. My folder name is unit test part 2. So I'm just creating using command prompt. You can manually create a folder. So here I'm creating using command prompt. Here I'm using mkdir and then I'm creating the folder name, and then I'm opening that folder into the Visual Studio. Once I open that folder in the Visual Studio, I'm selecting create environment by using key shift control and P, which will give me option to go and explore that create environment. And then I'm selecting create Python environment, and then I'm selecting the VNB for virtual environment, and then I click next, and then it will show me this window like curating environment. It will take few minutes, and once this few minutes is completed, that means this process is completed, you will be able to see that the folder structure are created. You can see here .venv file is created and it contains include library and other files here. Now we are going to first go with the test cases. So we are going to create a file and you can give any name. I'm going to give a name called test case example dot py. And then we are going to import unit test and then we are going to define our test cases. Our test case going to be a very simple test case where we are going to check this particular string is having same case or not. To do that, we are going to create a class called test string methods. So I'm going to create a class called test string method. So I have created a class called string method where is inherited from the unit test dot test cases, and then I have defined couple of test cases here. The first test case which we are defining here is that is to check this hello word upper is equal to upper. So for example, let me first remove this and make it very simple. So this test case, what we are having a simple test case where we are having a lower case of the string, and then we are making uppercase, and we are just checking that this particular function is working fine. That means this string after the converting to upper is equal to hello uppercase. So let me run this test. So if you see, we are able to see the result when test is working fine. For example, if I make it here one or make it something else, so what will happen? Let's say we will run it, this test case will get failed. So if you see here, failure is one, that means the test case is getting failed, because if you see the result here, assertion is saying that hello one is not equal to hello. So this is a very basic simple example of how to write the test cases. Now let's say consider you want to define your own method function which you want to test it. So this can be defined in different class as well. So I'm just defining a simple add function which will take two input parameter, and then I will make it return x plus y. And now if you want to test it, let's say consider I'm going to test this. So I'm going to define a test case. S add function. Just you can give any name, and then I can pass self, and then self dot assert. You can use assert equal or anything. Let's say consider we are using assert equal, and then we are going to call that method. So I'm going to call simple add function, and then pass 10 and 20. So we know what is expected. So when you pass 10 and 20, it should return 30. So we will put 30, and we'll check that this method is working fine or not. So when we run it, we are able to see two test cases, and both are getting passed. Let's say consider if I make it expected is 40, and we know this test case is going to fail. So you are able to see this particular test case is getting failed because 30 is not equal to 40. So this is how you can define your test cases. Now let's go and create other fi- test file. It's called test show example. In this, we are going to create a group of test cases and associating with a particular test show. So in this, I'm going to create a same method, whatever we have discussed, and then multiple test functions we are going to create, and we are going to associate that multiple test functions into a particular test suite named shoot. So here what I have done, I have imported that unit test, and then I have just keep it very simple. I just created a same class here, and that is test system, and then inherited from the test class, and then I defined couple of methods here. And then the major part is how to define a test suite. So if you see this example with the previous test case examples are very simple. Now here, if we are going to define a test suite here, we are going to create a suite equal to unit test dot test suite, and then we are going to add the test cases whatever we are going to execute it. For example, in this case we are having all three test cases we have added. For example, if you comment this test case, so I'm going to comment this couple of test cases from this test suite, and we will see how does it work. So when I comment this test cases from a test suite in this, and if I run it, so what will happen is going to run only one test case. That means whatever the part of this particular test suite is there, that is only going to run. So if you see, only one is going to run it. Now, if I enable this and run it, I'm able to see this all three test cases are running. So basically, this test suite is a logical grouping of the test cases. When you want to group a certain test cases in a particular test suite, we can group it. Okay, let's move to the next one. It's called text fixer. So text fixer basically, if anything which you are performing before states executed, or let's say consider before test start and after test execution happen. If you want to do something like, let's say consider, most of the cases we do test data setup and tear down the test data. So those comes under the text fixer. So I'm going to create a file called text fixer dot py, and then I'm going to have one sample here. So in this, it's very simple what we are doing it. We have created my test class, and which inherited from the test. All the test class file need to have this inheritance here, and then I have defined two method. This is tear down and setup. These are not a test method. This is basically a fixed session. That means when every time this test case runs, it will call. For example, I'm going to comment this particular test case just to make sure that they're going to. So in this is the only test case which we have created. These all are just a fixes. For example, setting up the test case data and tearing down the test case data. So when I run this test case, you will be able to see the one test case runs, and also whenever this test case runs is first call setup, that is the setup method, and then tear down. So how many test cases are there, or irrespective of the test cases how many you are going to define in this particular class, this particular two methods, setup and tear down methods, are going to call every time. I have added this print is just to explain that this method will call every time. So if you see this method and put a mouse over, you can see that these methods belong to unit test module and is part of the test class, test case class. So you can see that this is belong to these methods are not test method, is just a fixer which will call every time. So now I have a two test cases, and when I run this, what I can see this setup and tear down will call two times. Let me run this, and if you see here, you can see the setup and tear down is calling multiple time here. Let me clear it and run it. You see, setup tear down is getting called. So that's how this text fixer works. Okay, now we will move to the next, is called text skipping. I have created this file called text skipping.py, and this basically text skipping, as I have explained in earlier. Skipping, when you want to skip a particular set of test cases in a particular file. In that case, we will use this test escape. For example, if a file contains multiple test cases and there are some test cases which are under development, or because of any reason you do not want to execute, in that case we can use this test escape. So in this similar way, I have created a test escape class. You can give any name here, and then I have imported the unit test, the decorator which we are using, this unit test skip, and then you can pass any message. This messages anything. So in this test cases, if you see, there are two functions, two unit test functions are there, but we have added the skip attributes for one particular test case. In that case, what will happen? When we run it, one test case will skip and other test case will be executing. So let me clear it, and then so when I run this test cases, you can see two test cases run, but one is skip. Why is skip? Because of this attribute. So if I comment this particular test case, this attributes, I have commented the skip attributes. Now if I run it, this will run two test cases here. Okay, it's a failing because we are making that self dot fail, so that's why it's a failing. That's fine. But you can see these two test cases are running. One is getting failed because we are making this test case to fail. So whenever you are having a class where multiple test cases are there, and because of any reason, either system under development or because of any reason, if you want to skip a particular test cases, then we can use this skip method and we can skip that particular test cases. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribe my channel. It will help me to create more content like this. So if you have not yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and join my channel.